Mr. Dark Whispers.
The life of a long-haul trucker is often solitary, marked by endless miles and a unique perspective on the world. While many journeys are uneventful, some drivers encounter phenomena that defy explanation. From ghostly apparitions to terrifying human encounters, here are several such tales shared by those who live life on the road. Jerry Scott, a trucker since his mid-20s, recalls his most terrifying experience occurring in 2009 when he was 37. It happened on a desolate country road in the middle of Kansas. The night began typically, driving, listening to music, and sipping coffee to stay alert. As he drove, a thick fog rolled in, making visibility extremely poor. Though he considered pulling over, he decided to continue cautiously, reasoning that the empty road might be safer than stopping. A foul, overwhelming odor soon filled his truck, so repulsive he felt he would vomit. He quickly pulled over, opened the door, and emptied his stomach. The horrendous smell lingered, forcing him to cover his face. As he prepared to resume driving, he saw a figure ahead, unmistakably a man, limping across the road. The man wore an old white button-down shirt and black suspenders. Jerry was perplexed but decided to offer help. Before he could reach the first man, 4 more figures emerged from the roadside, all limping in the same unnatural gait and dressed in outdated farming clothes. What struck Jerry most was their complete disregard for his massive truck. They continued across the road, vanishing into the fog. Then, a much smaller figure appeared, a child. Jerry got out, remaining by his truck, and watched the child, also limping and in old clothes, cross the road. Just as the child reached the other side, Jerry called out, "Do any of you need help?" The child stopped, turned, and faced him. Jerry's heart sank. It wasn't the face of an ordinary child, but a corpse. The terrifying figure then let out an awful scream and began limping towards him, but at a faster pace. Jerry quickly got back in his truck, slamming the door. More screams erupted, and more figures emerged from the darkness. He swerved around the child and sped away. He glimpsed the faces of the approaching figures. All were decomposed corpses. Once he reached civilization, Jerry stopped at a gas station, his mind and heart racing. This encounter profoundly impacted him, opening his eyes to the strange and inexplicable nature of the world. Brandon recounts one of the weirdest accidents. He worked as a big wrecker rescue driver. He received a call about a turned-over tractor-trailer on a westbound exit about 9 miles from their shop. He was the first on the scene, finding the trailer overturned but the truck upright. He approached the driver, perplexed, and asked how he'd unhooked the truck from the trailer before it flipped. The driver explained he needed diesel fuel and didn't think his trailer would fit under the pumps. Brandon pointed out that if the trailer didn't fit, neither would the truck, and questioned why he didn't unhook on the diesel lot. The driver simply said he didn't know. He had dropped the loaded trailer on a shale bank, and when he pulled his truck out, the bank shifted, causing the trailer to overturn. Upon learning the driver was still on his 90-day probation, Brandon informed him he was likely fired. The driver was indeed fired after calling his company. An anonymous storyteller recounts a terrifying experience from 2005. When they were 8 years old and accompanying their trucker father during summer break, their dad told them to pack extra, as this route was longer than usual. Early the next morning, they departed. After a few hours, a loud scraping sound from the truck's bottom right side startled them. Their dad pulled over, exited to inspect the noise, and got on the phone, sounding upset. They then drove to a repair shop. After waiting for hours, they continued their journey around 6 p.m. The child played their Game Boy Color until they got sleepy, then fell asleep looking out the window. They awoke abruptly to their dad driving very fast. It was dark outside. Their dad, without explanation, told them not to be scared. Then, they saw something white rush up to the driver's window and then recede. The object reappeared, close enough to slap the window. It was a woman with long black hair covering most of her face, wearing a white gown and appearing to float. She slapped the window again, then came back once more. The child closed their eyes when they saw her about to press her face against the window. They heard their dad scream, curse, and whimper, telling them not to look. The child kept their eyes shut until they reached civilization. This encounter haunted the storyteller for years. Their dad never discussed it, 6 years prior to sharing the story, their dad passed away. The storyteller's mother revealed that the dad had told her about that night. The mother asked if the child saw the entity's face. The child said no. The mother then delivered the most terrifying revelation. When the entity pressed its face against the window, it spoke to their father in his deceased mother's voice, and he saw his dead mother's face. This experience tormented their dad with nightmares for the rest of his life. A 27-year-old truck driver from Southeast Texas, with 8 years of experience, recounts his weirdest and unexplainable incident during a night drive from Houston to Corpus Christi, Texas. He prefers night driving, finishing around 5 a.m., and usually listens to podcasts and sips coffee. He took a familiar shortcut, a thin back road with no cars or houses for miles, only occasional wildlife and the night sky. About 10 miles in, he saw a figure ahead. Slowing down, he initially thought it was an animal, but as he approached, he realized it was an average-height girl walking with her back to him, oblivious to his semi. She seemed unfazed by being in the middle of the road. He slowed to about 15 miles per hour and cautiously passed her using the other lane, as there was no shoulder. He noticed she wore sweats and a white shirt, no shoes, and had blonde hair. As his rig passed, he slowed further, intending to ask if she needed help. Just as his window was parallel to her, she snapped her neck to look in. For a brief second, they made eye contact. Her face was pale, with a blank expression, staring as if into his soul. Eyeliner ran down her face from tears, and she had an impossibly long mouth. Seemingly drawn with eyeliner into a permanent smile, he floored it. A semi with 2 loaded trailers takes time to accelerate, but as he gained speed, he looked in his mirror, and she was gone, vanished. About 40 miles later, at the end of the back road, he turned right at a stop sign. There, in the grass on the right side of the road, was a car, a Honda, and a woman with blonde hair and smeared eyeliner staring at him as he made the turn. He still doesn't know if what he saw was real or if he was just tired, but he has avoided that road and other back roads ever since. A female truck driver with 20 years of experience recalls an inexplicable event in June 2013. Around 2 or 3 a.m., she was driving on SR 95 from Arizona to Nevada, a desolate stretch of over 400 miles of pure desert. After clearing the first Border Patrol checkpoint, she noticed a 2-mile-wide blacklight pillar, darker than the night, which made her curious and apprehensive. Traffic was almost non-existent. About a mile past the pillar, she saw what appeared to be a very bright rest area. As she considered joining what looked like a rave, her truck suddenly shut down. As she struggled to pull over, she noticed headlights behind her also turning off one by one. The dark pillar in the sky remained. She then looked forward to where the rest area had been, but it was lifting off the ground. Its lights became brighter than the sun, illuminating the entire desert as if it were daytime. And disappeared. Only then did the headlights behind her in her own vehicle turn back on. Confused and scared, she drove another 6 to 8 miles to a real rest stop. There, between 50 and 80 other truckers, many of whom had also witnessed the event, were discussing it. They called and reported the sighting, which she believes might be archived online. The experience left her convinced that humanity is not alone in the universe. In 2012, Nanita, Brazil experienced the worst snowstorm she had ever seen while picking up a load in Spokane, Washington. Her truck was sliding and swerving, and despite the heater, it was extremely cold. Her company called, informing her of a hotel reservation in the area due to extreme cold temperatures. The hotel seemed cheap, and the attendant gave her a smirk as he handed her the key for room 605, which bothered her. On the second floor, she realized she might be the only guest. The snow outside was terrible. As she walked to her room, she heard loud knocking that seemed to follow her, even into the bathroom. She initially ignored it, thinking it might be other truckers trying to catcall her. Inside, she noticed an old tube TV. She went back to her truck to get her 36-inch flat-screen TV with an HDMI cable for comfort, relieved to find good Wi-Fi. After a long shower, the knocking continued, but she tried to ignore it. Back in her room, she felt a sudden, intense chest pain. So severe, she considered calling paramedics, but doubted they'd arrive in the storm. She stepped outside briefly, and the pain subsided. She noticed the fire department directly in front of the hotel, a source of relief. However, as soon as she re-entered room 605, the pain returned. Worse than before. She ran across the street to the paramedics, who put her on an EKG and told her she was fine, but to call if it worsened. This agonizing chest pain recurred 8 times that night, accompanied by constant knocking. She called paramedics again. They checked for carbon monoxide leaks but found none. After they left, she decided to pray. Mother had given her holy water to bless her truck, so she sprinkled some in the room. When she lay down, the bed began to shake slightly, then slid to the center of the room. Terrified, she turned on the lights and saw a shadow move from the bedside to the bathroom. Instead of fear, she felt anger that this thing was attacking her. She prayed harder and doused the room with more holy water. In the bathroom, the door slammed shut. She stood her ground as shampoo, then soap, and conditioner bottles lifted off the ground, arched backward, and were thrown at her. Realizing it could interact with solid objects to harm her, she ran out to the fire department. The firefighters initially laughed, but when she pointed to her room, the only one with lights on her floor, they gasped as they saw a shadowy figure standing in the window. Police were called and found her room in tatters, laptop and TV in pieces, clothes scattered. She didn't bother picking up her things and slept in her truck despite the cold. She couldn't shake the memory of the attendant's smirk, as if he knew what awaited her. This experience confirmed the supernatural for her and made her wary of room 605s in Spokane, Washington. Travison recounts a story told to him by a burly trucker named Jim in 1995. During a cold late night at a small Midwest truck stop, Jim, an owner-operator who hauled tractor parts on a flatbed, was a veteran of the road with kind, weathered eyes. He was enthusiastic to have a conversation, saying he hadn't spoken to a live person in 3 days. Travis, a new driver, listened intently as Jim shared a harrowing experience from about 10 years prior when he was hauling box trailers like Travis. Jim was in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, around 1 or 2 a.m., tired and ready to stop for the night. He pulled into a Flying J truck stop, backed up, and left his rig idling to keep it warm in the freezing cold. After a shower and a meal inside, he headed back to his truck. As he was getting into his cab, with his bag slung over his shoulder and his foot on the first step, he felt an instant chilling pain in his ankle. Someone had struck him with a crowbar. He crumpled to the ground, stunned, his ankle on fire. He looked up to see a scrawny, wasted-looking fellow crawling out from under his rig, crowbar in hand, coming right for him. Jim couldn't get up, bundled up and now crippled. He didn't know the man's intentions: robbery, murder, stealing the rig, or all of the above. The man's eyes held a look of madness, desperate and savage. Jim then revealed he pulled out his .357 Magnum from his shower bag, stating, "Laws and rules are for some." He shot the man twice in the chest. Terrified and in shock, he admitted the encounter felt like it lasted forever and only seconds. Jim was saddened, not bragging, and his eyes watered slightly, but he quickly composed himself. He couldn't imagine what drove the man to such desperation, but it didn't matter. He was gone. The gunshots alerted the truck stop. Police and an ambulance arrived. Jim spent 3 days in the hospital, and his truck, with 2 bullet holes, was towed and taken care of until he could drive again. He emphasized that the truck was his home and that he killed that stupid bastard. As Jim awkwardly stood to leave, Travis noticed a slight limp in his right leg. Jim stressed, "Be careful out there, kid. Always be aware of your surroundings, all of them." Hannah R. vividly remembers May 20th, 2008, when she was 16. She, her mom, 2 friends, were driving over the Cascade Mountain Range from central Washington to Seattle for a concert. These mountain passes are known for steep inclines, speeding drivers, illegal passing, and fatal accidents. As they ascended, Hannah's mom saw cars in their lane behind them, swerving off into ditches. Whatever was forcing them off the road was gaining fast. Hannah and her friends looked back and saw a massive semi-truck with a light blue cab and completely blacked out windows, no silhouette visible inside. The semi was hauling up the steep incline at an impossible speed for such a vehicle, forcing more cars off the road, showing no regard for safety. Hannah's mom, driving a Subaru Forester, was outrunning him, but he was soon right behind them. She pulled over and slowed down to let him pass, intending to get his plate and company info to file a complaint. To their shock, both the trailer and the cab doors were completely blank, with no plates. The only visible mark was a giant American flag painted on the front grille. Relieved that they weren't forced off the road and disturbed by the encounter, they sped up to pass him on a newly opened second lane, wanting to escape before he caused a major wreck. As they were almost clear, one of Hannah's friends flipped him off. The semi then sped up again. Hannah's mom floored it, nearing the top of the pass where it levels off and descends. She veered onto a dirt pull-off area close to the woods, slammed on the brakes and yelled for them to get out and run into the trees. They flung the doors open, leaving them, and ran about 30 yards into the woods. After a few minutes, terrified of what might be at their car, they returned. Thankfully, the semi was gone, and regular traffic was back on the road. A few minutes later, they passed 3 cars with crushed rear ends. They called 911, reported the incident, and described the truck, hoping the psycho would be caught. To this day, they don't know who was driving or what they were hauling, but it couldn't have been good. Hannah survived, made it to the concert, and even got attacked in the mosh pit. A great night altogether. She advises caution on roads, urging people to hold back road rage and avoid provoking other vehicles, as you just never know the scary people and unknown things out there. Nick recounts an incident from a few months ago while on a road trip with his mother to his childhood home in Nebraska. They were driving cross-state, and it was late dusk when they saw a Pilot gas station, which seemed like a breath of fresh air amidst the big rigs parked for the night. Nick, with bicolored hair and looking greasy from the heat, headed straight for the restroom. He passed a big hunk of a driver exiting the showers, barely noticing him at the time. After freshening up and getting a drink, Nick went outside to cool off. It parked at the very edge of the big rig area, and Nick decided to stretch his legs by walking around the supposedly sleeping trucks, avoiding the running ones parked at the back. His mother was content with her scratch-offs in the truck. As he lounged with his Gatorade, the same trucker walked by, and Nick gave a casual wave, feeling no immediate creepiness, just a tad bit of anxiety. Soon, Nick decided to return to his truck, cutting through the rows of big rigs for a quicker route. Suddenly, he heard a gruff cough and saw the same guy somewhat blocking his path. Nick slowed, feeling an eerie coincidence at seeing the man 3 times. As he was about to pass, the guy grabbed his arm. Nick stiffened, nervous and irritated, and remembered saying, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Aware of trucker murderer stories, he told the man his mother was waiting. The mountain of a man seemed unfazed, smelling of oil and sweat. Nick jerked his arm away and moved back. The man said, "Ah, now come on, don't you want to see the inside of my rig?" Nick shook his head, turned to leave, but was grabbed again. Terrified and angry, he said sarcastically, "I'm sure your rig is beautiful, but I need to get back." The man interrupted, "Now, Missy, please, come take a ride with me. I could show you some pretty neat things." He began pulling Nick towards the adjacent rig. Nick struggled, and when the man let go to get a better grip, Nick thankfully slipped away and jogged towards his truck. Back in the truck, Nick pondered the incident, assuming the trucker was making his getaway and watching him from his cab. He didn't tell his mother until they got home. Your moral of the story, Nick concludes, is to pay attention to your surroundings and avoid walking alone without protection in isolated areas, like gas stations in the middle of nowhere. Jessica relays a chilling story told by her uncle Stacy, a trucker who often encounters creepy people and drunks. This particular tale, however, stands out. Her uncle, living in Tennessee, was taking a load of produce to Illinois. He left at 2 a.m., picked up his trailer around 6 a.m., and was in central Kentucky about 3 hours later. He stopped at a truck stop for dinner. As he ate, a girl in a ragged dress approached him. Politely, he asked if he could help her. She replied, "I put his body in the river. It's in trash bags." Freaked out, her uncle tried to ignore her and finish his food, but she sat next to him, staring. When he finished, he asked the server for directions to the nearest gas station. As he left, the same girl was waiting by his truck. He asked her to move. She replied, "No, don't you want to see the bodies? They're just across the hill in the river. They've been there for about a week." "Why doesn't anyone want to see them? They have the same horror on their faces as when I slit their throats." Her uncle pushed her out of the way got into his truck, and locked the doors, assuming it was a prank. He drove to a 7-Eleven for water, but the same girl was waiting outside his truck, which shouldn't have been possible given the time frame. Ready to go home, he yelled at her to get the hell out of the way and noticed her eyes were red. He blinked, and she was gone. His uncle parked on the shoulder of the road, needing rest after what he'd seen. After about 2 hours, he heard his truck door violently being tried. He opened the curtains to see the same girl holding a bloody knife, saying, "I told you the bodies are real, and you're about to be one of them." Ensuring the doors were locked, he started the truck and left, not stopping until he reached Illinois. On his way home through Kentucky, he'd occasionally see her on the roadside. But the weirdness stopped once he crossed back into Tennessee. His family has been warned never to go to Kentucky, as he claims to see her every time. Jessica admits it sounds weird and is nothing personal against Kentuckians, but urges caution, believing this demon targets truckers. Orion recounts a story from a friend's dad, a truck driver. The dad left a small town in Colorado with a long haul to Idaho. He stopped at his first rest area, ate McDonald's, and filled up his truck. Entering Wyoming around noon, he encountered intense winds and heard a sudden scream. He looked around, saw nothing, and continued driving. About half an hour later, he heard the same screaming voice on the road ahead. As he passed, he saw a woman covered in blood, screaming, "You killed me," and pointing at him with blood dripping from her eyes. He checked the clock. It was 12:45. He told himself he was tired and needed rest at the next truck stop. He got out to grab a drink, but as soon as he opened the door, the wind slammed it shut, and the same woman was there. He tried to get back in and start the truck, but it stalled, was convinced he was a dead man. At 1 a.m., the truck roared back to life, and the woman was gone. He sped out of there. The rest of his trip was uneventful. Upon returning to Colorado, he quit his job, finding it too stressful and keeping him from loved ones. A few years later, his old boss called to say that a driver on the same road he'd driven before quitting had been killed. His chest had been ripped open with a hunting knife, and "You killed me" was written on his windshield. His friend's dad was 24 when this happened, and warned his son never to stay out past midnight, because that's when the demons come out, and they're always looking for a victim. An anonymous storyteller recalls being 16 in a small town in London, Ontario, around 1981, one hot summer Saturday night. She walked across town to meet a friend, Maggie, at a gas station. Truck stop. On the way, she felt watched, stopping to look around, but seeing no one. Inside the truck stop, as they grabbed sodas, chips, and hot dogs, a tall man in a hoodie, which seemed odd for a hot summer, stood next to the hot dog machine, smiled, asked what they were doing, and then inquired about their age. When they said 16, he replied, "Ah, wish you guys were older. There's a party going on, and I still might be able to get you in if you're interested." Maggie declined. He insisted, "Are you sure? You'd look pretty hot tonight," in a low voice. He then paid and left. Creeped out, they waited 10 minutes before leaving. They looked in every direction to ensure he was gone, saw nothing, and felt safe walking to the concert venue. After the show, as it was getting dark, Maggie decided to stay the night, and they headed to the storyteller's place. A few hours later, the storyteller was woken by movement and saw a dark figure outside her window trying to remove the screen. She screamed, and Maggie, also terrified, saw the man. They sprinted out of the room, nearly running into the storyteller's mom, who called the police. The house went eerily silent. Within 5 minutes, the police arrived, and the man was gone, leaving a large hole in the screen and a kitchen knife. Later, as they packed to move out of town, someone left flowers at their front door with a note. "I can't wait to see you again." Based on his height, they were pretty sure it was the same man from the truck stop. Storyteller, who graduated at 17 and moved across the country, never saw him again, but still locks her doors and windows every night. To the man at her window, she says, "I never want to see you again." She, a 20-year-old female, recounts a terrifying experience while working late-night shifts at her family's gas station in New Mexico. In early 2014, located near a grocery store and her mother's salon, the gas station was frequently visited by truckers from a busy truck stop across the way. She, who had dropped out of school to manage the store, was used to grown men mistaking her age and flirting. She started noticing a specific Hispanic trucker who would make uncomfortable comments about her appearance, particularly her leggings, always with a smile and a laugh. One morning, with her parents out of town, she went to work early for cleaning. She noticed a semi parked behind her mom's salon, a dead-end alley too small for a semi. She dismissed it and opened the store. About 20 minutes later, the same trucker tapped on the glass door. Despite her anxiety, she opened it. He exchanged greetings, gathered snacks and energy drinks, and then leaned over the counter. She gave him a disgusted look and he pulled back, but then complimented her thighs and leggings, this time without laughing. He kept talking, then said, "You're very beautiful, you know. You should come work with me." She forced a fake laugh, obviously uncomfortable. He moaned to himself. As he gathered his things, her coworker, a close friend, walked in. She asked her to watch the counter while she used the restroom. While she was in the bathroom, the trucker reportedly questioned her coworker about her schedule and availability. Her coworker, recognizing the red flags, told him off and threatened to call the police, stating she was a minor. She never had to face him again, but often saw his truck parked outside knowing he was watching her. She started feeling scared to go to work and told her parents about the advances, but they dismissed it as compliments. Stories of truckers taking women circulated among employees who advised her not to work alone. Eventually, a man was found dead in his semi across the street, with odd circumstances. She never knew who it was, but around that time, the trucker and his vehicle disappeared. She no longer works there, and likely won't work at another gas station. She doesn't dislike truckers, but resents creeps who exploit the job. She's grateful her coworker intervened and advises girls to be safe, travel in groups, and not be friendly to those who make them uncomfortable. Gina D., a long-haul trucker for 5 years, recounts her first truly crazy experience while hauling popcorn in Georgia. She was driving to a desolate farm about an hour from Atlanta, convinced her GPS was leading her in circles, when it started getting dark. Suddenly, she saw a little boy, no older than 5, crying and waving her down from a ditch, mouthing, "Please stop." She slowed down a considerable distance from the child, feeling bad but also an intense sense of wrongness. There were only woods around, no houses or cars. She immediately called the police, reported her location, and was told to stay in her truck and watch the child. Despite her gut feeling, she was torn between helping the defenseless child and obeying the police. Thankfully, she stayed in the truck. The child looked around frantically, still crying, but didn't approach her vehicle. The police arrived surprisingly fast. As sirens became audible, 2 all-black Escalades emerged from the woods and sped away. The police officer who arrived with the child explained that what she had witnessed was a gang initiation and the little boy was bait. She gave her statement, but received no further answers. The child was terrified but unhurt. Both were lucky to leave that desolate road alive. Snacks often commutes between Southern California cities, a 70-mile drive that typically takes an hour via freeways. To avoid LA traffic, she developed a habit of driving at 3 a.m. when only truckers and a few cars are on the road, allowing her to relax and listen to podcasts. Her parents worried, but she dismissed it as typical parental paranoia. One night, she had pushed her return home past midnight, finally deciding to leave her friend's house around 2:15 a.m. Her friend had fallen asleep, so Snacks walked alone to her car. She threw her bag in the back of her sedan, got into the driver's seat, buckled up, started the engine, and selected a podcast. Looking up, she found her car blocked by a large white work truck, an older model from the late 90s, with its right headlight burned out. The passenger window rolled down, and the driver, a short, fat, greasy, balding man in his 40s, leaned out of the cab's darkness. He had oily black hair and gave her a yellowed smile, motioning for her to roll down her window. Foolishly, she complied. I asked for directions to Victory Boulevard. She found it a silly question, as it's an easy street to find, but politely pointed the way. Yeah, it's just about 3 blocks down that way. You can't miss it. He seemed satisfied, but before rolling up his window, he said, "Stay safe, you hear? It's dangerous late at night for pretty girls like yourself." He then drove off. Snacks locked her doors and texted her friend. As she left the neighborhood, she looked in her rearview mirror and saw the truck with the one headlight following her. Her blood ran icy. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was lost, or she was leading him to the street. She glanced again. She couldn't see his eyes, but she knew they were on her. Luckily, she had to cross Victory Boulevard to get to the freeway. At the red light, the truck was still behind her. When the light turned green, she floored it, continuing past the intersection. To her terror, the one headlight was still on her bumper. Her stomach dropped, but her only option was the freeway. She floored it on the freeway, hoping to lose him in traffic. However, it was her ideal driving condition: few big rigs and even fewer cars. For 30 minutes, she weaved through the sparse traffic, but every time she looked back, the one headlight was there. She saw an off-ramp for a friend's ex-boyfriend's neighborhood, knowing it had twisty streets. At the last minute, she veered off the freeway, the truck screeching behind her. She ran a traffic light, giving her just enough time to turn into a neighborhood. She spent 5 minutes whipping around the streets, getting as lost as possible, then parked and caught her breath. No sign of him for a few minutes. Relieved, she started her car and headed back to the freeway. As she waited at a light to turn onto the ramp, she looked across the road and froze. On the other side of the intersection was the white truck with one headlight. He knew her destination because of her hometown license plate frame. The light changed, and she pulled back onto the freeway. The one headlight was still in her rearview mirror. She decided to drive to the local police station for safety. Traffic had thickened slightly, and she continued weaving through lanes. The truck began to fall further back until she couldn't see him at all by her home exit. She pulled down a side street and parked, seeing nothing. She guessed his old truck ran out of gas. Whatever happened, she was relieved. Anyone so determined to stalk her for almost 70 miles was not someone she wanted to encounter. She drove home and flung herself into her mother's arms, who, though initially worried about her lateness, hugged her when she saw her crying. Her mom agreed the terror was punishment enough. Snack still makes her 3 a.m. drives, but with an edge of caution, and sometimes swears she sees that one headlight on the freeway. An anonymous 15-year-old shares a bizarre story told by their father, who was 37 and a truck driver in Iowa at the time. Their father received a call from his company to pick up a shipping container at a farm. Upon arrival, he saw 3 unmarked cars, seemingly for federal agents. After hooking up the container, the cars followed him. He was instructed to drive non-stop, only stopping for fuel and bathroom breaks, to a military base in Nevada. He was even given clearance to skip all way stations, which was beyond weird for a trucker. Local police cars occasionally tried to pull him over, but the Secret Service cars would stop them, and they'd be back on their way quickly. Once he arrived at the base, he noticed twice as many federal vehicles as when he started. He was then made to get out of the truck, and a different driver got in, drove it into a dirt hole, and buried the entire truck, cab and all. His father didn't own the cab. He never knew what was inside the truck, nor did he ever want to. The narrator finds the story terrifying, thinking about what could have been so important to warrant burying an entire truck confidentially, escorted by dozens of Secret Service agents. They conclude that some very weird things are going on. In 2009, country 1989, a truck driver who typically hauled various materials was transporting a load of late feeder calves from Indiana to a rural farm in Wolfe County, West Virginia. After unloading, the farmer asked a favor to haul away 2 dead pigs to a local rendering plant, offering extra money. The driver agreed, as it was in his direction. The farmer helped him load the pigs. Later that night, around 11:30 p.m., the driver stopped off a narrow 2-lane road at an old gravel pit, needing rest and to work on his logbook. He and his blue-nosed pit bull Gunny felt a bad vibe, and Gunny was acting strange. The driver considered finding a different spot, but being tired, reminded himself he'd stayed in worse places. They hopped in the bunk and fell asleep. 2 hours later, a bang and a clank woke him. He flew up, cursing as Gunny stood growling, obviously scared. The truck was rocking, and something was being moved in the trailer. He immediately thought someone was trying to break in. Moments later, it stopped. His windows were down for a breeze. Crawled to the driver's seat, started rolling the windows up. The driver's side went up faster. As he watched the passenger side, Gunny jumped into his lap, barking and showing his teeth. When he looked over, a huge dog-like face with shaggy hair covering its body in huge, stained yellow teeth, was looking back at him. The creature smirked, then growled, and began tapping its nail on the glass with human-like fingers, while Gunny went crazy. The animal then turned and slowly walked away. Desperate to escape, the driver turned on his headlights and pulled backward, revealing the creature's immense size. At least 8 feet tall, with a body like a bodybuilder, long mangy black fur, with crimson-red parts, and dog-like legs with a bushy tail. It was dragging one of the dead pigs from the trailer. He saw another creature dragging the other pig behind it. The one in the back howled fiercely, vibrating the rig's metal, causing him to shudder and his dog to wet himself. They hightailed it out of there, driving 45 miles to a different truck stop. His roll door on the trailer was halfway bent out, meant to hold cows up to 1,500 pounds. The driver couldn't comprehend what had happened. For weeks, months, and years, he coped with the logic, knowing it was real. He's run that same route hundreds of times, but never stops near that road. 2 months prior to sharing the story, his truck acted up on that stretch of highway. He stopped at a gas station nearby. Grateful he didn't break down 2 miles back. He believes those bumps in the night are more than just wind or your house settling. Lady Raina Kay recounts a freaky, possibly paranormal experience from August 2005 in New Orleans while trucking with her ex. Fascinated by the city's voodoo, graveyards, and lore, she wanted to visit the Lafayette Cemetery with her new 35mm camera. They dropped their trailer at Home Depot and drove to the cemetery, marveling at old plantation-style homes, though one ginormous one made her uneasy. Her ex, disliking anything spiritual, refused to go in, dropping her off at the gate with a cell phone and speeding off. Walking the stone paths through the hollow ground, she felt an ominous presence, as if followed. The hairs on her neck stood up, and a chill ran through her, despite the nearly 90-degree heat. She clicked pictures of mausoleums, angels, and praying figures. Losing track of time, she noticed the sun dipping over unsettling trees and started back to the gate, which looked sinister in the dim light. She quickened her pace and spotted an elderly African-American woman, frail, in a bright outfit, with gray hair peeking from a bandana, and necklaces of wood or bone. The woman, with one milky eye and the other darting, startled her. She thought the woman needed help, and cautiously approached, thinking she was far enough to bolt if needed. But the woman, swifter than a lion, grabbed her arm tightly, leaving bruises, her nails digging in. She pulled Lady Raina Kay closer, revealing gnarly snarled teeth, tobacco-stained and barely hanging on, and pungent breath. "Leave this place, or you will drown for your sins," the woman rasped. Then her ex's distant voice came through her phone. "Hello, are you there? Do you need me to come pick you up?" She didn't remember dialing him. As quickly as she was snatched, she was released, almost forcibly thrown to the ground. She walked to the curb, waiting for her ex. It was getting darker, and crickets chirped. She could still see the lady pacing at the grave, watching her, muttering. When her ex's truck appeared, she flung the door open and hopped in, slamming it shut. Her ex, confused, asked if she was okay, then joked about her being scared of the dark. She told him about the old lady. He looked blankly and asked, "What lady?" He motioned to the gate. The woman was gone. There were no other cars, and they were parked directly in front of the only entrance exit. She stressed they needed to leave the state, but he didn't believe her warning, though he agreed to go. They drove through Georgia and Northern California, then to Biloxi, Mississippi. Within 2 weeks of almost constant driving, Hurricane Katrina hit. Lady Raina Kay believes the old woman was right, and had she not listened, they might have been casualties. Lady Raina Kay shares another terrifying experience from her time as an over-the-road truck driver with her ex. She grew up sheltered, so the trucking life was eye-opening. Despite the freedom, being cooped up in a small truck 24/7 was challenging. Back then, entertainment was limited to DVDs, books, or CB radio chatter, which became their social media. They used CB handles for anonymity. Her ex was Ninja Dwarf, and she was Northern Exposure. She encountered many crazy people and witnessed grosser than scary things, including drivers getting too friendly with their cabin buddy, even animals. But one experience was truly terrifying. She describes getting the heebie-jeebies from someone's voice, a voice that made her skin crawl even over the crackle of the CB. The CB started to crackle, and a distant voice, faint but eventually clear, called out. He must have been 50 miles behind them. His voice was like Heath Ledger as the Joker slurred through gritted teeth, just off, giving her chills. He asked the color of their truck and where they were headed, said he was going the same way, and asked to tag along, introducing himself as Maniac. For months, Maniac seemed to run the same route, though they never physically saw his truck. He described it as a black 378 long-nosed Peterbilt, with a brow and cattle guard hauling dry boxes from California to Florida. One week, running from Florida back to LA, they caught up to him on his return trip from Redmond, Washington, to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He said he'd meet them in Nevada when they needed to rest. Though Lady Ray Nikkei didn't want to meet him, her ex liked him, so they gave him their ETA and truck stop location. Cell phones were for emergencies then, so no easy calls. They finished their load and headed to the agreed-upon truck stop in Las Vegas. Shady place for truckers with quite a bit of crime. They waited in the truck, then ventured inside, eventually leaving without having met him. Months later, they ran into him in Oklahoma. They had heard radio chatter about lot lizards, truck stop prostitutes being brutally stolen at truck stops across Texas. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee. They brought it up to Maniac, who laughed, saying, "Must be one real sicko doing it. If it was true, it would have caught him already. I'm sure he wants to be caught." This seemed weird but characteristic of him. A few weeks later in Mississippi, they heard Maniac's voice on the radio. It was Labor Day weekend. Her ex, despite having an argument with her, decided to run with Maniac to have someone to talk to. They chatted, and Lady Ray Nikkei couldn't help but overhear the topic shift to the lot lizards. Her ex, trying to be tough, told Maniac he wasn't scared. Maniac, with a raspy chuckle, replied, "It's not you he's after," then added, "You know I really like to play with them before I destroy them. It's nasty. They're so nasty, so dirty, so defiled. You know they had it coming." They heard the rumble of a truck heading down the one-way street ending at the truck stop. Lady Ray Nikkei saw fear in her ex's eyes, and tears welled in hers. A dust cloud rolled into the truck stop, and a dark black, menacing Peterbilt with a cattle guard and a brow rolled slowly by. The driver keyed up as he passed their truck's nose. It was the same creepy guy from months ago, with the same twisted grin. He put the mic to his lips and said, "I'd hate to run into you again." His CB handle, Maniac, was pinstriped in red on his driver door. They reported this to the police, but there wasn't a large search for him due to lack of concrete evidence beyond his words. In April 2004, they returned to Alaska due to her ex's father's heart attack. They stayed a while before returning to the road. Lady Rain, AK, knows of 7 total incidents, but suspects more. She doesn't know if he was ever caught or if he's still out there. She decided never to make friends on the road again and always carried a 6-inch blade. One winter night around 1 a.m., he received a call about a broken-down trucker an hour away in the Pacific Northwest. He found the truck easily on the Desolate highway. The trucker smelled like he hadn't showered in months. The air controls in the cab of the early 80s truck were broken, causing alarms. The trucker allowed him into the sleeper cab. The cab smelled even worse. Gagging, Duo quickly worked. As he was cleaning up on the floor, something started rubbing across his chest. He sat up to find a freaking python. The trucker hadn't mentioned it. Duo, not afraid of snakes, was still startled by it coiling around him for warmth. He cursed and worked faster, while the old trucker laughed. After his giggles, the trucker put the python back in its cage. Finishing up, Duo got out, and the trucker said, "You think that was scary? Well, I got body parts in the back." Duo's heart stopped, alone on a dark highway with a smelly trucker who might be joking. But the smell and comment were unnerving. He went back to his truck to breathe, ran up the bill, and returned. The trucker pulled out his log sheet and wallet, saying, "Sorry about Bill. He got out and likes to hide in the dash when it's cold. Oh, and don't worry about the body parts. I'm hauling those up to the medical college." Duo sighed, took payment, and left. He now asks truckers if they have pets in their cab. He later learned the trucker liked to screw with people, which is why the local shop gave him Duo's number. A few years ago, a local logging company called Duo 2 Fix Old vandalized equipment deep in the Cascades, a specialty of his. He drove up carrying a .45 for protection and an AR. along with an Arctic sleeping bag, water, and MREs prepared for cougars, black bears, or camping. He worked for a couple of hours on the repurposed military surplus equipment. It was late, and the crew had left, except for the owner, who helped with final adjustments. Duo packed up his tools and paperwork, and the owner left. Cell phone coverage was spotty. As the sun set, his truck battery died. Too late to start it, he prepared to camp. He built a small fire from tree scraps and cooked his MRE. The sounds of deer, rodents, owls, crickets, and bugs filled the air. Then, all at once, those sounds stopped. It was completely silent, except for the fire. Keeping his eyes peeled, he finished his food, moved a log so his back was to the truck, and chambered his weapons. His elders had taught him that when the forest goes quiet, a predator is near. Several hours of insane silence passed. He occasionally put more kindling on the fire, an awful ways down the mountain. He heard a whistle that sounded like an owl screech but was not right. Another whistle came from higher up the mountain. He threw more wood on the fire for light and a buffer zone to see eye reflections. He gripped his AR tight and stood. Suddenly, masses of softball-sized rocks flew down the mountain, hitting equipment and at his feet, even breaking glass he'd replaced. He fired a few warning shots. Everything stopped again, and the maddening silence returned. About half an hour later, in the stone-cold darkness, he heard bang, 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 like a wooden bat hitting a tree from above him. Then, heavy thumping footsteps. It all stopped, and the silence returned. He waited, feeling helpless, armed but anticipating something charging from the fire's edge. Then, he noticed two reddish yellow dots on the hill, staring down at him. He could see them watching, blinking. He wanted to fire, but an inner voice told him, "It's not the one you see you should be worried about. It's the ones you can't see." He remained calm, continuing the staring contest. Eventually, the eyes moved and disappeared. He spent the rest of the night keeping the fire going, watching and listening. To his great relief, the forest sounds returned. Feeling safe, he crawled into his service truck and finally got some sleep. He was awakened by the owner knocking on his window. He explained his dead battery and lack of cell signal. The owner asked about the rifle casings and broken window. Duo told him the full story. The owner, stirring Duo's fire, then shared a story about another mechanic who had stayed there, quit the next day, and never returned to the woods for work. The same thing had happened. Flying rocks, silence, noises. Day jump-started his truck. Since then, Duo avoids working deep in the woods overnight. He says, things go down in the woods at night. Certain creatures don't want you around. Sad Monroe recounts a disturbing experience from early 2014. When she was 14 and her family opened a gas station in New Mexico, she was a rebellious sophomore, skipping school and eventually becoming the manager. She'd opened the store at 6 a.m. She noticed regulars and occasional customers from the busy truck stop across the street. She met weird truckers, but one Hispanic man particularly unnerved her. He seemed to live locally as she saw him often, made weird comments about her appearance, especially her leggings, always with a smile and a laugh. She'd cross her arms, disgusted, but he'd just smile wider. One morning, with her parents out of town, she decided to go to work early to clean. She saw a semi parked behind her mom's salon, an alley too small for a semi, and a dead end. Out. She dismissed it. About 20 minutes later, he tapped on the glass door. Despite her severe anxiety, she opened it, exchanged greetings, and gathered items. As she scanned his snacks and energy drinks, he leaned over the counter, which was waist-high for her 5 feet 3 inches frame. She gave him a disgusted look and he pulled back, but then complimented her thighs and leggings, this time without laughing. He kept talking, then said, "You're very beautiful. You know you should come work with me." She forced a fake laugh, very uncomfortable. He moaned. As he gathered his things, her coworker, a close friend, walked in. Sad Monroe asked her to watch the counter while she used the restroom. While she was gone, he questioned her coworker about Sad Monroe's schedule and off days. Her coworker, recognizing the red flags, told him off and threatened to call the cops. Sad Monroe was a minor and he was vile. Sad Monroe never had to face him again, but often saw his truck parked outside, knowing he was still watching her. She became scared to go to work and told her parents, who told her to take it as a compliment. Stories of truckers taking women circulated among employees who advised her not to work alone. Eventually, a man was found dead in his semi across the street under odd circumstances. Sad Monroe never knew who it was, but around that time, the man in his truck disappeared. She no longer works there and likely won't work at another gas station, believing that trucker was in more places than I noticed. She's glad her coworker protected her and advises girls to be safe, travel in groups, and not be friendly to uncomfortable people. Battle tendency. A former U.S. truck driver recalls an unusual incident from early July. He was driving, blasting the FM radio. When Carry On Wayward Son started to cut in and out, the lyrics replaced by static. He messed with the dial, landing on 88.9, which was pure static, despite knowing a station was there earlier. The rock station was also static. Frustrated, he banged the dash, then cranked the dial to the highest frequency. The static was gone, but nothing played. He assumed his radio was broken. 10 minutes later, with the sky darker but visibility good, a single long tone sputtered from his radio, like an old TV unable to find a channel. He checked his radio, curious. Within 30 seconds, another lower-pitched tone played. As time went on, the gaps between tones shortened until they were consecutive. Thinking it was a station test, he switched frequencies, but every station played the same robotic tones. He was in the middle of the desert, and it seemed impossible for a single source to occupy every FM frequency. He was about to turn it off when the tones ceased entirely. Then, a song came on. Scarborough Fair, an old English folk song. The audio had a whine, like a record. The female singer had a southern accent. He scrolled the radio, and the same girl was singing on every station. He realized he hadn't seen any other vehicles, unusual for a massive highway. Unnerved, he let the song finish. Seconds later, he saw something outside his driver's side window. A faint, large, round, black outline. Maybe 50 feet above the ground, about 15 feet in diameter. It was black as a shadow, sticking out against the off-blue sky. He watched it silently as it hovered, then realized his truck was moving at 80 miles per hour, and the object was keeping pace, maintaining the same distance parallel to his truck. Getting more freaked out, he didn't know what to do until the radio kicked back in with a series of tones. He wanted to turn it off, but felt if he did, he'd anger whatever the heck was out there. He'd let it play. More music came on, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, with the same record-like whine. The ominous piano was terrifying. He looked out the window. The shape was pulsating with the song, glowing brighter with each key strike. He accelerated, exceeding the speed limit, but the object effortlessly kept pace. A few minutes in, the music suddenly cut, replaced by an incredibly unnatural noise. A distorted, low-pitched female voice trying to speak English, repeating a single syllable. He probably said it 30 times before he realized it was trying to say being. With no context, he was clueless. The voice stopped, static returned, then a jumble of female voices saying random numbers and letters. A 6L43Z5K886. The shape pulsed with each syllable. Without warning, it stopped. The radio returned to static. The thing continued to follow him. Suddenly, it changed color from black to a radiating hot white. The cabin was lit up. Couldn't bear to look, covering his eyes, hoping his rig would stay straight. About 15 seconds later, darkness returned. He regained control, looked outside, and the giant black shape was gone. In its place were heat waves distorting the turquoise sky from the ridiculously hot air. He pulled into the next rest stop, staying awake all night, unable to come up with a realistic explanation. He still dreams of driving at night, hearing that woman's voice singing Scarborough Fair, waking when she finishes. Duo Durden, a diesel tech, shares another experience from a few years ago. A local logging company called him to fix old, vandalized equipment that few people knew how to repair, a specialty of his. He got the GPS location and drove deep into the Cascades, carrying a .45 and an AR for protection, as well as an Arctic sleeping bag, water, and MREs in case he had to camp. He worked for a couple of hours on the military surplus, looking logging equipment and trucks. It was very late, and the crew had left, except for the owner, who helped with final adjustments. Duo packed up and did paperwork. The owner left. Cell phone coverage was spotty. As the sun set, his truck battery died. Too late to start it, he prepared to camp in his truck on the logging site, which, while annoying, he didn't mind. He got a small fire going with scraps of trees. Sitting on a log cooking his MRE, he heard deer, small rodents, owls, crickets, and other bugs. Then, all those sounds completely stopped all at once, as if someone just pressed the mute button. It was completely silent, except for the fire. Keeping his eyes peeled, he slowly finished his food and moved a cut piece of wood, so his back was to his truck. He chambered his weapons, remembering his elder's lesson. When the forest goes quiet, there's a predator. Several hours of this insane silence passed. He occasionally put more kindling on the fire. Suddenly, awful ways down the mountain from the road, he heard a whistle that sounded like an owl screech, but didn't sound right. Another came from further up the mountain. He threw more wood on the fire to brighten his area and create a buffer zone for seeing eye reflections. He gripped his AR tightly and stood up. Suddenly, masses of softball-sized rocks began to fly down the mountain, hitting equipment and his feet, even breaking glass he'd replaced that day. He fired a few warning rounds. Everything stopped, and the silence returned. About half an hour later, in the stone-cold darkness, he heard bang, bang, bang like someone hitting a tree with a wooden bat, coming from above him too. Then, heavy thumping footsteps. It all stopped, and the maddening silence returned. He stood, waiting for something to break from the fire's edge and charge. Then he noticed two reddish yellow dots on the hill, staring down at him, watching and blinking. He wanted to shoulder his weapon and fire, but an inner voice said, "It's not the one you see you should be worried about. It's the ones you can't see." He remained calm, continuing the staring contest. Eventually, the eyes moved and disappeared. He spent the rest of the night keeping the fire going, watching and listening. To his great relief, the sounds of the forest returned. Feeling safe, he crawled into his service truck and finally got some sleep. He was awakened by the owner knocking on his window, explained his dead battery and lack of cell signal, as well as the rifle casings and broken window. The owner gave him coffee, stirred up his fire, and sat on another log. Then shared a story about another mechanic who had stayed there, who quit the next day and never returned to the woods for work. The same thing had happened to him. Rocks, silence, noises. They jump-started Duo's truck. Since that night, Duo avoids staying in the woods overnight at all costs, and no longer does work deep in the woods. He concludes things go down in the woods at night. Certain creatures don't want you around. Sad Monroe, 17, reflects on her experience working at her family's gas station in New Mexico when she was 14. In early 2014, located by a grocery store in her mother's salon, it was a rinky-dink convenience store. She died. Despite developing early and being used to men mistaking her for older and flirting, her experiences there left her on edge around truckers and truck stops. During her sophomore year, she was rebellious, often skipping school. To avoid scolding, she offered to cover for her dad at work while he did bookkeeping. This became a regular arrangement, and she eventually became the manager. Opening the store at 6 a.m., after about 6 months, she started noticing patterns in customers, including regulars and those from the busy truck stop across the street. While she met many weird truckers, one Hispanic man particularly disturbed her. She believes he lived locally, as she saw him often. He would make weird comments about her appearance, especially her leggings, always with a smile and a laugh. She'd defensively cross her arms, but he'd just smile wider. One morning, with her parents out of town, she decided to go to work early to clean. She noticed a semi parked behind her mom's salon and alley, too small for a semi and a dead end. She dismissed it and opened the store. About 20 minutes later, the same trucker tapped on the glass door. Despite her severe anxiety, which often triggers abort mission signals, she opened it. He exchanged common greetings, then gathered snacks and energy drinks. As she scanned his items, he leaned over the counter, which was waist-high for her 5 feet 3 inches frame. She gave him a disgusted look, and he pulled back, but then complimented her thighs and leggings again, this time without laughing. He continued talking, then said, "You're very beautiful, you know. You should come work with me." Sad Monroe forced a fake laugh, feeling very uncomfortable. He moaned. As he gathered his things, her coworker, a a close friend, walked in. Sad Monroe asked her to watch the counter while she used the restroom. While she was gone, the trucker reportedly questioned her coworker about her schedule and off days. Her coworker, recognizing the red flags, told him off and threatened to call the police, stating Sad Monroe was a minor and he was vile. Sad Monroe never had to face him directly again, but would often notice his truck parked outside, knowing he was still watching her. She became scared to go to work and raised her concerns to her parents, who told her to take it as a compliment. Stories of truckers abducting women started circulating among the gas station employees, who recommended she stop working alone, as her coworker was rarely there anymore. Eventually, a man was found dead in his semi across the street under odd circumstances. Sad Monroe never knew who it was, but around that time, the man and his truck disappeared. She no longer works there and will likely never work at another gas station. She doesn't dislike truckers, but dislikes creeps that use the job to their advantage. She's grateful her coworker intervened, believing who knows what he would have done if she wasn't there. She advises girls to be safe, travel in groups, and not be friendly to people who make them severely uncomfortable.